Hi everyone, welcome along to the Stage by Stage show live, the third edition on Sunday the 14th of June. If you're watching this live, as usual, please enter some comments into either the YouTube or Facebook comments. Any questions you have as we go through the show, we'll be happy to do that and take your questions. So the start of the show is Neil Wearden. We'll get him on shortly. So the idea of tonight is the second part, effectively, of the weekend. So on Friday with the podcast, we did the learning and we pulled all the learning out and spent most of the time doing that. Tonight's more relaxed, so any questions you have, quite happy to answer them. And we've got a couple of guests, Angus Watt, who co-founded Slipstream Sports Management with me. Angus will be on. And also Phil Pugh, the 2012 WRC Academy co-driver. He'll join us a little bit later. So he's world champion as well. And so a good lineup and plenty of chat. The Slipstream sports management model that we had seemed to have generated a fair bit of comment. So we'll spend a bit of time doing that as we go through the show. But first off, let's get Mr. Wearden in. Neil, how are you?
I'm good. Very good. Thank you, Trev.
How's your weekend been?
It's been quite warm, actually. Very warm today. I was working yesterday in the garage and I've decided to take a me day out today and been in the Lake District chilling out.
I saw. What's all this going on?
Yeah, look at that.
What was happening
And what
there?
concerns me, to the right of the paddleboard there looks like a bit of a vortex. I have no idea what that was, unless it was a shark I didn't know about. I don't know.
So did you exceed the speed limit?
Yeah, I thought I'd put that in for effect. No, I didn't, definitely no.
All right, okay. So that was a lovely day out there.
Yeah.
Well, what time are you up there? Did you go today? Was it just a day trip?
Yeah, I went up this morning. I was out the door at 6:30 to get out and beat the crowds. It's quite busy in the lakes on a nice sunny day, even with partial lockdown. But I had the lake to myself for a little bit, and then it got busier and busier. So I had a bike ride after that, and then I went in the fells walking. So I am actually quite tired now.
That's been a busy old day then.
Yeah.
So did you get a chance to listen to the podcast yourself?
Yep. Yeah.
Have you had much feedback?
Yeah, I've had good comments about it from some friends. Yeah, it's been good. And it's always strange listening back to yourself and what have you. But it's been interesting. It's been a learning experience for me as well. To be honest with you, I'm enjoying doing it. I'm sort of a seasoned pro at podcasts at the moment. I seem to be doing them all the time.
Yeah, just for information, if you want to hear a little bit more about Neil and our journey, so there's two places you can look at. I mentioned in the show notes for the podcast. First is the Absolute Rally podcast that we did. I think it was in August of 2019, last year. If you go on to, let me just get it up here for you. If you go onto the blog, so stagebystage.com/blog, you'll be able to see the episode with Neil. And in those show notes, we've got a reference to the Absolute Rally podcast that we did, talking about the 20th anniversary of our win in the Ulster Rally primarily, a bit about Slipstream as well. And then also 2 weeks ago, I think it was, we did a little piece, an interview for three guys in Ireland, absolute complete rally nuts. They're focusing on the 2001 World Rally Championship season, which of course is the year that we competed in the 206 World Rally Car. So that was an hour and a half of us chatting and some fantastic memories. And again, it's just the thing for me as part of that is just those guys are so passionate about that particular year because it was an incredible year, 7 manufacturers involved in it. And you sort of think back, and it wasn't something that I remembered at the time. Also in the Astra, in the kit car, 2 years with the Astra at one of the epic times of the British Rally Championship. So in our 5 years together, we had 3 years where it's just incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't. And looking back, like you say, you don't realise that you were involved. We didn't feel as though it was a special time almost because it was just a job and that's what you were doing. You were focused on doing the best you can and getting to the World Championship and what have you. But yeah, looking back, fantastic times. Yeah, without a doubt.
Brilliant. Okay. So if you want to have a listen to our podcast that we did on Friday, that's where you'll find it, stagebystage.com/blog. And we'll refer back to that a couple of times as we go through it. Right, let's see who else we've got in here. Angus Waugh. How are you, Angus?
Hey Trev, I'm well. How are you?
I'm wonderful. What's your day been like?
It's been nice. I've been watching the kids do the garden.
It's good delegation skills. No better man for
Yeah,
doing that.
yeah. So we had a bonfire, cut the grass, swept up the terrace, made it all look nice, and then had a barbecue.
Excellent. Okay. So your background with me, really, co-founding Slipstream Sports Management, as I said, we've had a lot of interest around that. So once we get going in a second, you'll be able to tell everybody how to do it. And then we'll have a chat about whether it would actually work in this day and time, because people keep asking me all the time, do you think that model would work? I have no reason to see why it wouldn't, so we'll chat about that. Okay, one other person then is Mr. Phil Pugh. Look at
Here he is.
Look at the background there, right?
Hey.
Few pots, a few trophies.
Just a few.
And a happy man smiling. How you doing, Phil?
Yeah, I'm good. I've had a special haircut for the occasion, so hope you appreciate that, Neil.
I've been cutting my own.
Good lad, Phil. Good lad.
You forgot
Cheers,
about
Neil.
the makeup. You forgot to get the powder on. You didn't
Oh,
live
sorry.
from telly. Yeah, you get that sorted as well.
I've tried to replace mine on the chin.
Your head slipped a bit. So Phil, 2012 WRC, so World Rally Champion in the Academy class with Mr. Elvin Evans. It was. Is that right?
Well, I'll have to put you right there, Trev, because I never really was world champion.
Oh, weren't you?
Because I didn't do the first round in Portugal. Andrew Edwards was with Elvin then, and you needed to do all rounds. So unfortunately, I missed out. It doesn't really bother me because the goal was to get Elvin to win the championship, and that's what he did, which was fantastic. So he became the junior world champion, and I just helped him along.
Excellent. Okay, so you were part of Slipstream as well, which we'll get to, as I say, in a second. The second co-driver behind me to be part of it, and hey, yeah. So we'll have a chat about that in a little bit. Of course, we'll chat about your time with Guy Wilkes and a few other things. So, first off, let me just get to a question then, Neil. We'll get you working straight away. So this is the very first question for you. What's the best advice for getting the most out of a front-wheel drive car, and any tips? That's from Joe Walker.
Apart from drive it like you stole it, you mean? Without doubt, in a front-wheel drive car, I remember watching Dale Llewellyn's in car when I first joined Vauxhall. One of the engineers was talking to me about how Dale Llewellyn used to drive the Astra, and it was very, very minimal steering input. If we watched him in car, the steering wheel very, very rarely moved any more than 90 degrees left or right, and that's for me has made a difference all the way through my front wheel drive career. It does carry forward to rear wheel drive to a certain degree in four wheel drive, but mainly so in front wheel drive. The least amount of steering input you can put into that car, obviously the least amount of tyre wear you're going to get. But if you can keep the car with them front wheels pointing in the direction you're wanting to go, that you're going to make that momentum forward all the quicker, really. That's basically one of the biggest tips I could give anybody for a front wheel drive car.
So efficiency is what we're talking about here.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Left foot braking?
Yes, when I first started in the front wheel drive car, I was in. It was in '95 when we won the British Junior Championship, and that was my first year in the front wheel drive. And we just had a standard gearbox, so I learned to left foot brake myself that year. So a lot of the hard braking was done with the right foot because we were having to use the clutch to chase down the gears. But when we're in the corner and when I wanted to settle the car down on the brakes or move the car around, I would use the left foot brake then. And obviously then when we moved on to the Astra with a flat cut sequential gearbox, it was just left foot braking all the time. It was very rare I used the right foot at all to brake. So without a doubt, left foot braking, if you can teach it yourself or get somebody to teach you, that's certainly a massive advantage.
I just want to tell the story about the first time that we got together in a rally car. It was on gravel. It was doing course car in the Kent Forest stages. Now, I've never been in a front-wheel drive car on gravel before, and we set off along this straight. It must have been about a quarter of a mile long, and up the gears, and the little Honda was singing, and getting close to the square right at the end of it. And I think he's going to brake now. He's going to brake now. And then all hell broke loose. Like, it fired it one way, fired it the other. It was like a Mark II Escort. So this thing sailed at the apex, nailed it in the middle of it, and off we went. And I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be interesting. And literally for the next 7 miles or whatever, that car was absolutely flat out, like a Mark II Escort, sideways, wherever you want. And a front-wheel drive car, I couldn't believe it. We got to the end of that stage, and I remember the brakes were on fire, as I remember it. And Richard Asquith, who owned the car and thought it was a good idea to get us both involved, was stood at the finish line at the stop control. I wonder what his thoughts were. Do you remember that?
I remember the rally, yeah, for definite. And obviously it was difficult. It was strange for us, for myself, because first time I'd met you, and obviously then we did the rally together, and it's first time with the team, so it was all a bit strange for us. But as soon as we got in the car, got on the start line, everything became normal. So you just drive the car as fast as you can, and obviously it worked because Asquith took us under their wing for a very good couple of years.
Yeah, I think it was, we certainly got things tidied up a little bit better as well, got you a bit more efficient, more effective,
yeah,
and got us going forward and a bit more. Okay, we've got another question then. Let's just have a look at this one. So from Richie Long, thanks for the question, Rich. What was your best and favourite stage to compete on?
There's obviously some great stages. Tarmac, probably Abbey St Bathans on the Jim Clark. I really got a soft spot for Jim Clark Rally. Can't say why, but there's just something about the area. The stages are brilliant, but Abbey St Bathans stage has got everything. Narrow sort of moorland roads and wide, fast 2-lane roads. Brilliant them. I absolutely love it. But then I seem to remember Network Q Rally or Wales Rally GB, whatever you want to call it, back when we were doing it. There were some great stages down in South Wales. Resolven, I seem to remember, was one of the longest ones. I really enjoyed them. Brilliant stages to drive on. So yeah.
Resolven, we had a fantastic time. I thought it was a very competitive time in the Subaru in 2001.
Yeah, perhaps that's why I like it.
Yeah, I remember Burnsy actually complimented us on the time on that one in particular. Abbey St Bathans, brilliant. I remember 2000 in the Astra. We were leading the rally, I think, after 5 stages, but that particular, I think we did it in reverse. So we started at the far end of it, and there's a bit where it comes over the top and then goes down through the trees. And I remember it was singing then. It was absolutely brilliant. Yeah. So I agree with you on those two. Okay, right. Let's get Angus in, and we'll have a chat about Slipstream then. So what was happening with Neil and I with 2 years in the British Championship? So we talked about having those fantastic 2 years with Asquith Autosport, very professional team. That led to us having 4 offers from manufacturers to do the British Championship at the end of 1998. And again, with Angus's help and a couple of other people, I was managing Neil Vauxhall, simply because of the most number of World Championship rallies. They planned to do 4. I think we ended up doing 3. And we decided to go with Vauxhall for those reasons. And we knew that in the British Championship, we'd have a good shout in 2000 especially. So the first year was to learn, second year was to have a go at the championship. We managed to win the Ulster Rally in our first year, which was absolutely brilliant, especially my home rally. But all the time we knew that we needed to do something different. We needed to come up with a different plan to everybody else who'd been through the British Championship if we were going to make it to the World Championship with a fighting chance of a manufacturer spotting us and signing us and effectively paying us to compete in a factory team. So as a result of that, then Angus and I, typical ideas that usually formed in the pub. So we were in the pub one night, and the chat started. Angus, if you want to take it from there, that'd be great. So it's, as I say, there's a lot of people really interested in the whole Slipstream model. And if you want to just give us your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. We've been we've been looking at the typical route that people would take, which was to try and land a sponsor, and we could see that that wasn't really working out for people. Firstly, because of the huge amount of money that was required just to do 5 rounds of the WRC in a half decent car. We were looking at something like £250,000 at the time. So it became clear that we would need to get funding from elsewhere. So I think I'd had a conversation with Chris Aylett, who was running the Motorsport Industry Association, and we were doing some stuff with him, going on trade missions and stuff like that. And he was talking about funding of racing drivers in particular. And we were sat probably in a bar one night in a hotel somewhere, and we discussed the idea of how he'd funded his business. He'd had a business which had been quite successful in the USA, Gold's Gym, and he'd built that up and sold it and got out of it. And this was how he had the time, the sort of leisure time to run the MIA, which was mainly an unpaid role. And we started to explore the idea, you and I, of maybe using a more business-like model to fund initially Neil, because that was the problem of the day, was finding the money to get Neil into the World Championship. And then we started to look at how it might be an investment opportunity. So in other words, we could present a plan a little bit like Dragon's Den, I suppose. So if you all think back to the last time you saw that program, there's a couple of young guys or girls or people, a family, a partnership, a business partnership, a husband and wife, and they're standing there in front of the Dragons, and they've got a business, and it's been sort of running along. You know, they've been selling beer at car boot sales, or maybe they've been selling sauce at festivals, or they've sold some wheelbarrows on eBay, and they've got a little bit of traction, but what they need is an investor, someone to put some money in to give them that extra push that they need to get to where they want to go. So it's very much a similar case. You commit shares in your company, which as a driver is you. So you and your potential to earn money from a manufacturer, and then hopefully from sponsors and from merchandising in the future. And you say, well, I'll put all of my income into this business, into the pot, and I'd like you to put some funding in to get it going, and we'll have an equity share in the business. To start off with, the Dragon, of course, wants to get the biggest share that they can. It's slightly different with the driver, because you really haven't got, at that point, you haven't, other than your talent, which you've displayed so far, you don't have this drive in a works team. So it's all sort of future potential that this is the only thing you can contribute to the business. So our model was basically, a lot of it was long, very complicated legal stuff to do with employment law. But what we had to do is we had to form a company where the driver could only ever work for that company and never work for anybody else. So everything that he earned had to go into that company. But at that point, the company was completely worthless. And the only value it had was the money that the investor put into the business. So if the investor put £100 in, at that point, the business is worth £100 and £100 only. So we came up with an idea whereby the investor would own 90% of the shares in the business and the driver would own 10. And then we set a number of milestones, which when they were reached, the driver would gradually earn back his shares in his own business. And of course, you see that on Dragon's Den as well. Sometimes they come down to the last minute negotiation before they get a deal, and the Dragon says, well, look, I'll have 40% of the company, but I'll give you back 10% once you're in profit. And that's a similar kind of idea. So the plan was that the milestones might be first signing for a works team, first World Championship point, first win of a WRC event, runner-up in the championship, world champion. Those are the milestones at which the driver would earn back the shares in his own operating company, in this case, Neil Wearden Limited. And that was what we set out. So with that plan, we could put that in front of an investor and say, well, this is what you're actually going to get for your money. You put your money into the business. At that point, you own nearly all of it, which seems fair. And then we invest the money in the talent, or invest it in the product, which is the driver, by working out a contract with a satellite team or a semi-works team, who would run Neil in the World Championship in the selected rounds, and hopefully his performance would encourage the people who make the decisions in the factory teams to think about signing him up, and then paying him a salary. And then as he reaches those milestones, obviously he becomes more and more valuable, and in order to hold on to him, that works team has to pay him more and more, and that way the equity switches back, and the investor gets a return on their investment, and then the driver eventually ends up, well, probably owning same kind of proportion of his income as any other sports person would. Most agents are known as Mr. 10% or Mr. 20, Mrs. 20%, and that's how it would have worked out in the long run.
I remember that the spreadsheet that we had for it was something like 36 pages long. So we had Top Company, which was the Slipstream management portfolio, and then each driver that we had got their own separate company. And it was a hell of a piece of skullduggery with James Kelly, our accountant at the time from Rawlinson Hunter.
It was, and Bob Tomkis.
And Bob
Tomkis created the spreadsheet. So we as the idea developed, it became more than just a plan for Neil. We thought, well, this is a little bit. Again, with some advice from James Kelly, he said, well, one of the problems you've got here is that you're a little bit like a chemical company that's only going to make one chemical. If that chemical doesn't work out, or it becomes outlawed or whatever, then you've got absolutely nothing. He said, so you need to have a few more products here, and if possible, you want them to be coming, because there's a limited lifespan for this driver. He's only going to be at the top earning for a certain number of years, like any other sports person, rugby player or a runner or anything like that. So you need to be bringing other products up behind him. So that's why we started looking down the junior ranks, right down to teenagers who were just sort of coming to the top of their karting at sort of 14, 15 years old. So that we settled on 4 to start with at different points, and that's how the spreadsheet became as many pages as it did, because as you say, each one had to the costs at the end at the front were going to be the same all the time. So not only did we need this vast amount of money to contract a semi-works team to run a car, we were going to have to run that car every year. And in fact, we even talked about when we got the second or third driver in at that point, we would maybe even start our own team. But that was a bit sort of that was an advanced idea a bit further down the line.
Yeah. Neil, do you remember all of this then, and your thoughts when we told you what we were hoping to do?
Yeah, obviously I do remember it, because it was a massive part of my career, a massive upscale in what we were doing. And I seem to the pub seems to come into it quite a lot, because I think we were outside a pub when you first told me about it. But I do seem to remember going to Portugal basically to do some rally car shopping. I remember going to a very, very, very wet Portugal, I seem to remember, and basically looking around the teams that had the satellite teams or the semi-works teams or whatever, and looking at their setup and trying to pick the right one. I didn't get too much involved with the actual ins and outs of the costings of them. I was just looking at just giving advice as well from a driver point of view of which
fair to say the cost went up though when you got back from that trip, Neil.
I'm sure they did. Yeah.
I just want to bring you in now, Phil, as well, because you were co-driving at the time, Simon Hughes, and Simon was 18 at the time. So he was somebody we saw a lot of potential in. And at that point, we needed to have a second driver in the British Championship. At the time, I think you were in the Peugeot Challenge. Is that right? When we first saw you.
Yeah.
You want to talk through what your first experience with Slipstream was?
Well, it was sort of a brand new concept, wasn't it? So I don't think many people had heard of it or realised what it entailed, really. And myself, you know, I didn't quite understand what it entailed and everything. So the more you think about it and think back to it, it was a fantastic idea and a schooling for myself. You know, I wasn't young. I was 30. I was late into the game. I'd messed about before turning to rallying seriously. And, you know, they brought me in to co-drive for Simon, who was, I remember meeting him in Sweet Lamb for the first time. And he appeared from behind the back of the famous Sweet Lamb shed. And I thought, oh, it can't be him. He's way too young. He can't even handle a car. But, you know, I got in the car with him and soon realised he did have a bit of talent. So, yeah, what Slipstream taught me after that was fantastic, you know, from your mindset to your fitness to you, Trev, with your, you know, your guidance on what a co-driver should do. It was priceless to myself as a co-driver. It was great. And, you know, if you could set something up like that again and pick the right people, it'd be fantastic.
So do you think it's got legs? Do you think the same thing could happen again?
Well, definitely. You know, why not? If Angus could do his dealings and get hold of somebody, and there's a lot of young talent still out there who in this current climate, you know, they've got a lot to prove. Some great co-drivers there, great young drivers, and they just need a chance. And you know, we always hark back at what the French have done, but they've produced world champion after world champion. So, you know, the French Federation have helped them lads a lot. I'm not saying MS UK can help to that degree, but I'm sure there's things they could do and maybe work with an investor or whatever to bring these young lads onto the World Championship stage.
It's quite interesting, Angus, because you'll remember that we did actually speak to Oliver Pignon from
a lot.
French
Yeah,
Federation.
he was calling us every week at one point, wasn't he? He was really interested in what we were doing, and I think wasn't Loeb in Saxo at the time? I think he was just coming up. And who was the other lad? Was it Daniel? Somebody?
Sordo. Daniel Sordo was there as well.
Yeah,
so
and
he was
were
Spanish.
Yeah, and I thought there was another French driver as well. They were supporting too.
Yeah.
And they had as a the country's ASN, they had a certain amount of money they were happy to put in, but they could see the potential in being able to bring more money in to the pot to spend on their driver development program. But boy, they were really committed to it, and the results speak for themselves. You know, they've been very successful, and also we were also looking at the model used by the Finns, by Timo Joki and his stable, which was much more simple. It was basically, I pay for the car, and when you start earning money, you give half of it to me. For the rest of how they did it contractually, legally, I guess we'll never know. You know, think things are obviously a little bit different in Finland. Or maybe it may have even been run out of another country altogether, but it was certainly very successful. And I think you and I, Trev, we went up to Wales Rally GB. Was it last year? No, the year before. And we saw Timo Joki there, and he was in discussions with a well-known Finnish driver and his increasingly well-known son, and we could see the same process was about to take place yet again. To produce another works Finnish rally driver.
Yeah, we have spoke about this on the odd occasion, not for too long, but do you think it would work again on what you observed in 2018 when you went to Wales Rally GB?
Well, we can see there that the only way to prove yourself, the only way to prove that you can drive cars at this level and get some within an ace of the times of the works drivers is to get in the car. And I don't know what the costs are now, but I can still remember the costs of the events using the Grafoni Peugeot 206 WRC. We're looking at sort of 50 or 60,000 euros to do a European rally. I think New Zealand was 115,000 euros. So a vast amount of money. That was 20 years ago. So I don't know what it's likely to cost now. I don't imagine that it's gone down. But and we could see that was, that's still the case. I think to put somebody in a car, maybe the junior cars or the WRC2 is cheaper to run. Maybe the manufacturer subsidise it. I don't know at the moment, but it still comes down to raising quite a lot of money in order to prove yourself. So if we were walking around with a business plan today, knocking on doors as we did, we had meetings with all kinds of people. Mainly in London, but in other parts we went to France, and we went to a couple of other, Italy and Spain, and did presentations to various companies. I've got to say, at the time, what was on our side was the huge investment that was going into the WRC, following a huge investment into ProDrive, which is where I'd worked previously. There's a big venture capital outfit called Apex Partners, and they'd bought, I don't know, more or less half of ProDrive or something, and then they'd gone on to invest in the World Rally Championship with David Richards as its head, of course. And Apex are a big name in the city, and other companies watched what they were doing, and that certainly helped us opening doors. There was a bit of a buzz going around, and people wanted to know what was happening. What we did learn, of course, is that because we already had our initial investor on board, and we'd had more than enough money to carry out our initial plans. A lot of them just wanted to meet our investor before they'd introduce us to theirs. But they were interesting times. So getting an audience wasn't that difficult because WRC was very much an up and coming investment prospect for people. What we didn't have then, and we've got now, is social media. And if you go right back to the beginning of this conversation where we're talking about sponsorship and the way that a sponsor measures a return on their investment, is they look down, they get all sorts of statistics and reports that tell them how many eyeballs have landed on their brand. So if they're selling cigarettes, 555, for example, they would target a particular market. They'd go off and do the rally in that country. They'd give out samples. They'd do TV advertising, magazine advertising, the whole thing that we're used to seeing. And then they could look and see how many eyeballs had got onto their brand. And then maybe at some period after that, a year later, they could look and see if they'd actually sold any more cigarettes in that market. So that was how it was done then. But with social media, with what we have now with YouTube videos and YouTubers, who would have predicted YouTubers 20 years ago? These are people who start out doing practically nothing with nothing. But as they move up through the ranks of YouTubers, they earn more and more and more money simply by those eyeballs landing on their page or watching their videos. And I think that's possibly where where the money flows are now, where the money could come into it. So, not knocking on an investor's door and saying, I've got a plan I want to run through with you on a projector or on a laptop. I'm not sure, especially with the environment that we've got coming up, because measuring the success of that is a little bit more difficult. But measuring the success of a social media campaign pretty much happens automatically. The numbers are down there on the screen. So I think that's something that if we were to be doing this again, that's something we'd certainly have to explore. And maybe there's, I don't know, just thinking off the top of my head, if you can come up with a viable plan and convince somebody that a particular individual is going to be a works rally driver and then a world champion driver, which is what the Finns and the French are doing today, as the discussion we just had, then maybe you can convince someone that somebody's going to become a YouTube star, and and that's the revenue stream. That's where the money's going to come back.
Okay. A couple of things I just want to cover here. One is the other thing that was an advantage to us at the time. We had Colin McRae and Richard Burns at the top of their game, battling each other in 2001, of course, for the World Championship, and we know how that ended on Rally GB. So that was a big help for us as well, because rallying was front page news.
They were very competitive days, weren't they? As we've said earlier, the number of manufacturers in motorsport, not just in rallying, but the manufacturers were in Formula One and they were in touring cars, and everywhere you looked there was lots of manufacturer money coming in, which then brings the sponsors, because of all the connections between the manufacturers and their supplier base, and their technical partners and marketing partners and brand partners, and it does produce quite a nice big pool of cash, which our driver wants to get paid out of, when he gets that job as a works driver or co-driver.
Neil, do you remember that you were probably one of the very first rally drivers to have a website? Do you remember that? That was Angus's idea again. We instead of having your name on our names on the side of the window of the Astra, we had Wearden.com. Do you remember
Wearden.com. Yeah, I remember that. And you see, that was right. That was the early stages of websites and everything, wasn't it? And we had real good feedback from that. It was. I wouldn't say it was groundbreaking, but it was certainly. I don't think there was anybody else at the time had thought of that. It was a great thing to have, but obviously, I look back now and I think if we'd have had social media now, then a totally different ball game, isn't it? The way people get a return on their investment, like Angus was saying.
Yep. Angus, we've got a question here, which is a fairly obvious one. Did the investor get the expected return from Lee Tyndall? Thanks for your question, Lee. Again, anyone else watching live, either on YouTube or on Facebook, if you type in any questions into the comments, if we've got time, we'll try and get them all answered.
Well, in this case, in cash terms, unfortunately, they didn't. We were running through 2000, 2001, when the attacks on the World Trade Center occurred. We were in discussions with a works team. They had two drivers they were considering as their third driver. Neil was one of them, and we just needed a little bit like the gambler who needs another $50 to throw his last hand in. We needed a little bit more money, but the whole world changed pretty much overnight. In fact, we were on our way to the rally in New Zealand when it happened. I was standing in the queue at Heathrow Airport to check into a flight to LA, to New Zealand, Auckland via LA, and I was with Steve Webb, Colin McMaster, and journalists from the Times when the whole thing started to unfold. And in the time it took us, the 2 weeks we went to New Zealand, turned around and came back again. When we got back to London, the whole world was completely different, and from that point forwards, it became very difficult to get a meeting with anyone. So that particular investor, they didn't get a financial return on that, but at the same time, our other organizations that we were kind of competing with in terms of trying to get a driver into works team, the Finns and the French, the FSSA in France, they certainly got a return on their investment, because several drivers over the last 20 years have made it into the WRC and earned a lot of money.
Phil, I just want to bring you in. The challenge that we have in the current environment, where you've got the 2017 spec cars, which are 2020 cars clearly, but there's no privateer access to those. So in order to prove yourself in one of those cars, it's a ridiculous amount of money. We saw Pontus Tiedemann last year competing on 3 or 4 different rallies, and I shudder to think how much that cost, and didn't really make an impact that I felt that he should have.
No, exactly. It's so difficult to to get on a ladder in rallying at the moment. Because saying I had discussions with representatives from MSUK a few years ago. There's no junior team, there's no one make championship at the moment. So for a young lad who's got some talent to try and get onto any ladder is very difficult. And I think the governing body needs to have a real good look. I did suggest you get R5 is a great is a great category. There's so many manufacturers involved. I said a few years ago when I was helping Tom Cave and Oshan Price that MSUK should get all the manufacturers who have got cars and got distributors in the UK around a table, thrash it out with them. MSUK put a bit of money in as well, and for each one of those manufacturers to put a car out there in the championship. You're going back to what you spoke about your day in 2000 in the Astra and that, and how many manufacturers were doing the championship and that. It was fantastic days. So I think there needs to be more thought put into it. A cheaper way of rallying as well to start with from the juniors, but everybody needs an incentive in life to carry on with something. So you've got to form a structure somehow. And I'm not the expert to do it, but I'm sure there's cleverer people than me who can sit down and work it out.
Yeah, I just want to bring you back in, Angus, in a second about this whole manufacturer involvement. And of course, the governing body and where they're going to get the money. And of course, is the licensed player going to pay for it? But in the current climate, there seems to be a lot of talk at World Championship level about getting manufacturers involved. They've clearly decided they're going with the current spec World Rally cars, although I can't see that lasting much longer. The R5 car, known as R2 now, a lot of people are saying would be much better prospect for bringing manufacturers in. So a couple of questions to you, Angus. One is manufacturers, what's in it for them? And secondly, the governing body, what's in it for them?
Well, manufacturers have been involved in rallying pretty much since the early days. Right back to the 50s. BMC in this country, BMC and Ford always fielded big teams, and they became more and more professional through the 60s and 70s. So the saying in the day was win on Sunday, sell on Monday. So they certainly saw it as a way to sell cars. They must still see it as a way to sell cars, or they wouldn't be involved in it. It's a way. What they're trying to do is make their product look a little bit different from everyone else's. And I think today's cars look more like each other than they ever have. So the case for taking your car onto the World Rally stages and showing how it can overhaul its competitors, despite the conditions of rocks and gravel and snow and ice and all the things that are thrown at it, I think still make the rallying, racing, or motorsport relevant for manufacturers to sell more vehicles. In terms of the ASN or Motorsport UK, that's a little bit more difficult. Their role is to administer the sports rights that they have for each individual country as part of the organisation that's the FIA. Does it make a huge difference to them whether the people of their own nationality are competing in the events? You'd have to ask them. I'm not sure if it does. Obviously, the FFSA in France, they see it as being very important to have French drivers at the forefront of the sports that they're involved in. But again, it's a question of money, and you just alluded then to license payers, covering the costs for promoting, paying for drivers to gain this experience that's absolutely essential for them to make their way up into a works team. And what we've seen with licenses is they're now the lowest level license is now issued free. So there's no revenue from that at all. So I'm not sure that's going to work.
Yeah, interesting. It's something clearly. We had a conversation with the MSA as it was back then. We went and met them a couple of occasions just to see if the commercial side of things that we were advocating, if there was any way we could work together, but that didn't work out back then, if you remember.
Yeah, I remember it well. We went and sat in those oak panelled rooms down at Colnbrook with the little cups of tea and the little biscuits and stuff, and it was very much a sort of civil service sort of environment, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And you could, all the big paintings around the wall of Bentleys at Le Mans and things like that, and I half expected them to hand round the cigars at the end of the meeting. So it was quite a kind of old-fashioned environment. Very, very different now, Trevor. You know, you and I both know the people who are heading up Motorsport UK now, and it's undergoing quite a radical change, not just in the way it's managed and promoted and constructed, but they're actually moving out of those oak panelled rooms, and they're on their way to a new more sort of modern location. So there's a lot happening there, but whether any of their plans involve spending money on individuals, I don't know.
It is quite interesting. If you start to run the maths, and you need 2 or 3 million euros to have an effective campaign in the World Championship, and that's just one driver when they're ready to go there. Then you've got all the other build-up and the younger drivers that you need to invest in to have a model like ours. So you don't just take a chance on one person. And you start to crunch the numbers, and you think, even if it's rally people that had to put a supplement in there, you know, if you spoke to rally people, would you be interested in us adding X amount onto your license fee? You're talking about doubling their license fee minimum to get anywhere near those numbers. And again, that's just one driver having one hit in 1 year in the World Championship and 5 rallies. So the numbers don't stack when it comes to that. And I think certainly the focus, from what I've seen with David Richards, with Hugh Chambers, with Colin Clark, is a focus on grassroots motorsport. And the idea that you can have your Honda Civic Type R and go to a hill climb without putting a cage in it, maybe putting a helmet on, and go and have a blast in your road car, or grassroots, and typically grassroots, production car trials and really cheap motorsport. I happened upon one of those recently up in Suffolk, and it's mighty fun. You know, you can rent out a car for next to nothing on the day. So I get all of that. And of course, we've seen the big push with sim racing and esports at the minute, where you can get yourself a rig, as we spoke to John Armstrong last week, for £2,000 or £3,000, and off you go. And you can have mighty crack with that as well.
Don't mention that to my son. Sorry. £2,000 or £3,000. Well, he's big into his esports now, and his rally games. He entered the British Rally Championship esports thing. To be fair, he is really good. He's very good with the setup he's got. Is really good. He's got a gear shift module on it that he's rigged up some elastic bands so it turns it into a sequential box and stuff. But he's still on a swivel seat and what have you. So whenever I've tried to go on it, I press the brakes too hard and then I lose all my foot. Pedal box just goes underneath the desk and I can't find it, so I crash. But it is impressive, I must admit. And obviously with the lockdown, lots of more people have it's massive now, isn't it? It's amazing. But so what would you rather? What would you rather have then? £2,000 or £3,000 on the best rig? If that's the case, it might even be more. I don't know. Or continue with that little project that you have in the workshop outside? Well, the projects. Just tell everybody what it is. Separate. Those people who don't know. We as a business bought a Hyundai i20 rally car, and the reason I bought it was because of closed road rallying, as obviously Phil knows well from the organising. There was a local event, Northwest Stages. I literally went past the front of the garage on a road section. There was a stage 2 miles down the road. And as soon as I found out it was a goer, I'd heard the rumours about it over the years, and I thought, that car, it won't happen, surely. Anyway, sure enough, the organisers done a fantastic job in getting the thing up and running, and I simply couldn't not do it. So I looked into hiring cars. That was way too much for just one event. So we decided to buy a car. we bought it from John Mulholland, who's sadly passed away now, but it was a fantastic little Hyundai i20 1600 sequential box, Riga dampers, and I've now realised after doing three rallies, and I think I've done tarmac and gravel, that it's just not fast enough. So I've decided to put an all-singing 2-litre Duratec. So it should be, when it's finished, very similar to actually. I'm hoping it's better than the Astra, because I'm pretty sure the damper technology has come on over the 20-year period I've been out, but it handles really well. And if I can make it go a little bit faster in a straight line, then it should be a good little thing. But it's just, rallying for me is, I take it or leave it. I enjoy the process of the engineering side of things, and if we go out and we can prove it's a good little weapon, then I'm happy. Whether Nathan, my son, gets his hands on it is a different matter. Maybe £2,000 or £3,000 on a new setup for him is probably a better investment. I don't know.
Cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just worth mentioning as well, Phil. We know you're chairman of the committee for Cardigan Bay Rally, and you've had to cancel this week, unfortunately, or last week.
Yeah, I think it's difficult times, isn't it? And it was going to be probably inevitable the way things going. And then Rally GB, we were, as in Wales, we listened to Mark Drayford, the first minister, because obviously our set of rules are different to England, Northern Ireland, and Scotland. So yeah, we listened to him every 3 weeks on a Friday, and he wasn't really giving much out. And the last time he spoke a fortnight ago, it wasn't very, very good. It's this 5 mile local rule we've got in at the moment. So keeping everybody safe. So when GB said, they were cancelling, it was we had a quick conversation and basically told all our partners and sponsors that it wouldn't happen this year, but we've already got the route for 2021, and we're so looking forward. It's a fantastic event, fantastic committee, and such a hard working group of people that I'm really privileged to be involved in, and it's a big passion at the moment.
So it was hugely successful last year. I was hoping to get up, and last minute something happened and I couldn't make it. Certainly you've got 3 marshals for next year. It'd be a good excuse for us all to get together.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
That'd be mighty fun. We'll all come and do that.
Oh, well, hang on, Trev. Marshall, you might be co-driving me doing it, yeah?
There you go. Come on.
It's a scoop. It's a scoop. It's your role, and Angus. What are you going to do on the event with us then?
Well, I'll have to sit in the service area and try and calculate predicted stage times, like we did before. Do you remember that on Rally in Finland? And well, you wouldn't remember because, of course, you guys were in the car. But I had a spreadsheet, and we were trying to find the perfect line between pushing the car hard. We knew by then that it was fairly fragile. The transmission used to break quite a lot. And so we'd make have a discussion each service about how hard to push it, and I had a spreadsheet, and I can't remember how I did it or how I worked it out, but I could work out I could predict the stage time, and Nick Galino, the Grafoni team manager, is looking over my shoulder saying, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I think the boys are going to do a 17:28 on this stage." Somehow or other, I was within a couple of seconds every time, which was quite surprising for those boys because they thought it wasn't really in their makeup to try and work out where you were going to be on each stage. It was just for them. It was a case of maybe we should have pushed a little bit harder on that particular rally, but I think we needed a finish. I don't think we'd actually recorded a finish up until then. And that was one of the events where everybody really was looking to see what we would go like, and that's one of the few regrets of the whole thing, is that sometimes we didn't push the car a little bit harder. And I remember, Neil, you went off and did some tyre testing. I think it was in Greece for Michelin.
Greece. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and that was in the old Toyota, wasn't it?
It was.
In the Corolla. And you came back afterwards and said, maybe the Corolla's still not a bad car. It's an half go. It seems to be as quick as the Peugeot. But of course, we'd never know whether there was a restrictor in the turbo or not, because it wasn't actually competition trim. Anyway, straight off the subject a little bit there.
Yeah, but I just want to cover this off. The reason we went for Peugeot and we went for the 206 World Rally car, because clearly it was dominating in the previous 2 years as a factory car. And even on the first 2 days of 2001, we talked about us going to Portugal to do some rally car shopping. Gardemeister finished 4th in the Monte Carlo and 5th in Sweden. Now, those 2 rallies traditionally aren't hard on a car, but it was still enough to convince us at that time, together with the subsidies that were being offered by Grafoni, because their business was split at that point. Step 2 ran the Corolla, Grafoni ran the Peugeot. But it wasn't just Grafoni, it was interest from Peugeot, in particular Jean-Pierre Nicolas, in Neil and getting a British driver in. That was the idea, and that's why they subsidised the car for us. If you just want to
and that was it was clear that that's what they wanted. They were very interested. I can remember the first time I sat in the Peugeot camp, in the service park. So Corrado Pavera would sit there in front of a big screen in front of him with all the stage times and the drivers down there. And I went over there with Nick, and we sat down to have a coffee and a chat with him. While you guys, I think it might have been Corsica. Anyway, we were all out on the transport section, heading to the start of the stage. And I looked down, and all the works drivers were down there, all the factory drivers, and then Neil Wearden was there on their screen. And I thought, and that kind of it sort of struck me then that they were comparing his times to Panizzi's times to the rest of the works drivers, and we at that point we really were part of it, and that was with the association with Grafoni. We did talk to the other privateer teams. We spoke to All Stars, we spoke to M Sport, but it was obvious to us then at that point that the Grafoni opportunity gave us that extra little edge, that extra half a foot into the Peugeot camp.
Yeah, it was an important thing because from a driver development point of view, which is what I headed up, it was important that we knew exactly what these teams wanted in a driver. And I had some inside information. I was very friendly with Lapworth, and we met regularly just to talk about progress. And he mentored me and helped me out to understand a little bit. Of course, the manufacturers weren't interested in the British Championship back then. So what we needed to do was come up with a template of what the perfect driver would look like. And we had sounding boards from M Sport, from Peugeot, from clearly Subaru, and even Hyundai we went and had a chat with. Do you remember those days as well?
Yeah. Well, we talked to as many people as we could. I mean, I'd been on the sort of sidelines. I hadn't really been. Most of my exposure to the teams and the rallies and the competitions up until then was working in the sales division for ProDrive and Subaru. So most of what I was doing was in Asia, a little bit in South America, not so much in Europe. Europe was mainly running Group A cars and WRC cars. It was. There were interesting times, weren't they? Every time, we got a weekly phone call from Autosport and Motoring News. And, we certainly had the feeling that what we were doing was being watched with interest, being tracked.
Do you remember as well, it's something I mentioned on the Sprint podcast we did, the model we produced was taken on board by Dr. Jonathan Palmer, wasn't it? Used a similar model, only it was more an IPO, it was a share offering for Justin Wilson.
Wasn't it for Ralph Furman Jr.? Oh, I can't remember.
It was for Justin Wilson anyway, wasn't it?
Oh, was it? Okay. Yes, I do remember that. I remember seeing. I remember reading. Well, same as reading about it in Autosport or something that they picked up the idea, and people saying, "Well, that's someone's nicked your idea there." Well, it wasn't really our idea. We were just the first people to push it into rallying. at that level. It was like anything, it was a combination and an evolution of other ideas. And we were actually really pleased, delighted to see somebody else trying it out, especially in Formula One, because that would make it a much easier sell and easier for us to encourage other businesses and companies and brands and investors that up until then hadn't had any exposure, hadn't got involved in motorsport, that maybe there was a business opportunity there.
Yeah. Phil, you remember 2001 year when we were in the World Rally Car? I think you came on some rallies, did you? Or certainly Simon did. You might have been too busy working.
Yeah, I think I was myself. I think Simon did come along. I did. I think we ventured to Monte Carlo, watched Monte Carlo, and then certainly a young man called Seb Loeb really stood out then, didn't he? I think it was first time he set some faster time. Can't remember if he won the rally, but he was certainly super quick and yeah, inspiring, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was something else. Do you remember, Neil, that he used to, well, Corsica in particular, I remember him run behind us on the road? Seb Loeb and Daniel in the Saxo.
On which rallies, Trev, sorry?
In Corsica.
In Corsica, yeah. Well, I remember first time with Seb was the Network Q as it was back then. Rally GB was, I think it ended up winning F2 because we were obviously trying to win F2 in that, and I think we had a problem with the car, and I think Mark had a problem with the car, and then I think did Seb end up winning it in a little Saxo or something, or certainly was up there, but I didn't know who he was at the time. But then I saw him at the end of the event and saw his stage times. I thought, wow, that's impressive. And then obviously he just went from strength to strength after that. I should have put a tow rope behind him.
I remember it was David Williams who alerted me to him, because David Williams, God rest him, he was the rally journalist in the UK. He was just, and again, a fervent supporter of what we were doing upstream. He said, you want to keep an eye on this guy, and I certainly kept an eye on him. Got to know the year in 2001, both him and Manuel. And yeah, so I just want to come back to you, Neil, about the Oliver 206.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts then? Because at one stage, as you've mentioned before, in the space of 6 weeks, you actually drove 4 different World Rally cars, didn't you?
Yeah. The biggest thing I found with the 206 was how much grip it had on tarmac. The first rallies we did obviously were, well, the test was on gravel. We did Cyprus, which was a very slow event, second and third gear corners.
We went to Germany, didn't we, to do a massive test. We did Rally Germany first, treated that as a test.
Was Germany...
It was after Cyprus, yeah.
It was Germany's after Cyprus, yeah. So that was the first time I'd driven the car, and specifically the shakedown for the event. We turned up after doing the recce in the Audi 80 TDI, left-hand drive. And then I jumped out of the left-hand drive, 200,000 mile Audi 80, and jumped in a 206 World Rally car. And wow, it was just, I remember trying to warm the tyres up out of the service area to the shakedown stage, and it literally turned 90 degrees within a split second. The grip and the handling of it was just absolutely awesome. There was a very complex launch control start, which I probably got right probably 6 times out of 10. It wasn't a major issue if you didn't get it right, but when you did get it right, boy, oh boy, that thing launched off the stage start. You had to get the exhaust temperature right, turbo speed, engine temperature, everything just right in the right parameters. And when you got it right, it was an absolute weapon. And that was the biggest thing. Tarmac in that car was trying to learn how much grip it had, because it was just unreal. And obviously coming from a Formula 2 kit car, they were awesome anyway. But going into that, trying to find the levels of grip, because this, you could still find that level of how far you can push it, but trying to get up to that level, it was a lot higher than anything I'd been in before. So it took us a little bit of time, but through the event we gained, I think, in Rally Deutschland, and I was impressed at the stage times at the end of it. We were pushing on, and it was extremely enjoyable, that.
Yeah, it's fair to say that it was an extra rally that Grafoni wanted us to do, and I think Peugeot certainly had a big influence on us doing it. And from our point of view, knowing that the model was going to grow, it was around the European Championship, a candidate event for full inclusion in 2002 in the World Rally Championship. So it made a lot of sense for us to go there and learn the stages and have an advantage prior to going back there in 2002, because that's the way we thought. And there were factory cars there. Certainly, Gronholm was there in the Peugeot, Delacour in the Focus, Bigalski was there, etc. Then there was privateers. Arm Kramer, I think, was leading the rally at the end of the first day. Or certainly,
and don't forget, Walter Roll was there in a Porsche as well, course car.
Yeah,
That's something
exactly.
else, isn't it?
Yeah. Kramer was leading right up until the last stage in the first day, and he binned it. He ran into an Armco. But yeah, the times in that towards the end of the rally, certainly the middle of the second day, which was always our focus, learn on the first day. The second run of the repeat stages on the Saturdays where we could push on and start to establish ourselves, and that worked really well, and it allowed us a really good benchmark for going Corsica. And for me, the two rallies we were geared for and we were set up to go to were Corsica and New Zealand. So we'll talk about Corsica first, Neil. And the times there were very impressive. Like, we shot top 5 times. We beat Panizzi, who was in the works car. He was our teammate, of course, in the gravel rallies. Complete nut. And yeah.
Giles Panzini, wasn't it called? As John Millington used to call him.
The Panzini brothers. Yeah.
Giles Panzini. Yeah.
Well, he had the advantage that he any stage within 100 miles of Monaco or on Corsica, he knew like the back of his hand. So you did an amazing job to get anywhere near him, having only been over them twice for a pass on a recce. And then that really was something else.
I do remember Corsica. Unfortunately, it was the stage I remember the most, and we were absolutely on it. I seem to remember the stage, and it was a series of 4 4s and 5s with me, which is really fast corners, but all blind corners. And I remember being absolutely on top of the car, totally. But literally a few miles from the end of the stage, we just took a left-hander a bit too fast and went off the road and parked it on a wall, I seem to remember. But that seemed to be sort of my career quite often. Just everything was coming together, and then something would go wrong like that. But no, it was a difficult rally. Obviously, a lot of corners in that event, but it was an enjoyable one. We really got on top of the car on that event as well.
Yeah, I think that the stage, I think we were 10th. We're certainly in the top 10 the first day until with turbo issues. I think in stage 4 we dropped 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes. We had to drive through in limp mode, and then Mackinnon tipped it upside down, I think, and
I remember that.
Got hurt. Yeah, but yeah, we had to build the speed back up again, and as you said, it was impressive. New Zealand, I thought was very impressive as well. So 9th, 7th, and 5th quickest time, beating Posthorn in all 3 stages, which is what Richard Burns. His advice was, if you can get anywhere near Possum in his home rally, then you'll be travelling. And of course, we know in the 4th stage where we were definitely on it. And that year there was an issue with the fuel rig, and we effectively ran out of fuel 4 stages in to that expensive rally that Angus talks about. But the times, Angus, I think you were impressed as well, and our investors and everybody.
The times are fantastic. Graffoni boys were jumping up and down with joy in the service park, as the times come in on the first leg. And then who was the privateer who ran out of fuel first? Was it Gardemeister?
I'm not sure. There was a lot that year. Petter ran out, I think, in Rally GB that year as well. So.
Yeah, so I think it was Gardemeister. I think he and his co-driver had basically pushed the car back into service. So they ran out of fuel at the in control, or something went wrong with the car. We didn't know then it had run out of fuel, and they weren't allowed any assistance, and they almost killed themselves pushing it from I think you came from the in control, then you went into refuel or somewhere. They had no fuel, and we didn't realise then. We didn't find out until months afterwards, really, or weeks afterwards, that there was a fault with the refueling rig, and it wasn't dispensing the amount of fuel that the co-drivers asked for, and that basically that ended the rally. A really, really stupid thing like that. And I think that we had a gearbox issue, didn't we? We had to change the gearbox.
Yeah.
But the boys did that it reminded me of John McLean's team in Ireland when they used to change Trevor Cather's gearbox every leg in about 13 minutes on a Group N car. And these boys changed the gearbox in the Peugeot in absolute record time. They had a crowd around them watching them, and got you guys back out again. That, as Trev says, that was the one that we were working towards the whole time. That was the rally that was going to really make a mark. And we got let down by something stupid like somebody didn't put enough petrol in it for us.
It was just a strange one. Yeah, it's the engineers who asked for it as well, not the co-driver. But it was only a small amount. I think it was something like 10 litres is all we had to put in at that time. And
that was tiny, because it was because as I say, Gardemeister ran out on the way at the in control of service just before you boys. I think you must have run out.
You're talking about Gardemeister. He was actually in the factory cars in the set at the time, and I think it was a result of what he did in New Zealand the year before. Because I think he ended up 4th or 5th at the end of the first leg. It's certainly his impressive times, and had we got to the end of that day with fault free, if we could have powered through all those stages, and it wasn't a long leg, and we could have been in a shout of doing that, and it certainly would have cemented the speed that we had. And as you say, at the end of the year anyway, we had actually 2 teams, if you remember, with Subaru and Hyundai that were looking our services the following year with subsidised rates to compete in, with Hyundai, it was the whole championship. Subaru 7 rounds, the world champ. That seat event's going to Atkins.
So we went to Sweetland, didn't we? And Neil had to go in the Hyundai. And, I was stood there's a big jump and a water splash, and I was stood chatting to Dave Whitehead, and he sort of said, so what do you think then? Neil's just going out in the car. He said, I hope he's careful with it. I hope he doesn't, there's something to the words to that effect. I hope he doesn't break it. He's not hard on the car, is he? What's he like? Because this car's got a certain amount of life left in it, and then we've got to do other things with it. And I said, no, he's really gentle. And at that moment, you took off on the jump right behind him as I'm talking to him. He's framed in front of me. You must be about 6 feet off the ground. The car flew through the air. A few other people had driven it, but you were going so much faster than anyone else had been in it. I went, no, David, he's he's never broken the car yet, as far as I know. A couple of broken out from under him, but it's not that hard on them.
Excellent. Okay. Let's go over to the comments then. So, hi, Anthony. Good to have you here. Lee Tingle, the investor, we've done that one. Totally agree with Angus. Said, thanks, Graham. Got a new sponsor for an event a couple of years ago and said to me after how many hits he had on his website after the event was over. Yeah, big focus on it. Nigel, good to see you again. Yeah, 90s, a long time ago. What will British rallying be like in 10 years' time? Phil, do you want to take that one away for us?
That's a friend who's posed that question.
Is it? Okay.
Yes, it's a difficult question. I think, obviously, with what I myself is involved with closed road rallying, I think that's a big way forward. And if we can keep the costs down and keep improving the events, I think it's all about, what Angus is into is about investors' return, and certainly on Rally by Ceredigion, we try and give the investors and our partners as much a return as we can. It's building relationships up, and I'd hope to see that there's some sense keeping costs down and getting a formula for these young lads to show their talents, and that'll be the way forward. And hopefully in 10 years we'll still be talking about it, and there'll still be a future, because there are issues that electrification of cars is coming, hybrids are coming into the World Championship. So how that will affect us down to all the more grassroots level of things, it's difficult to know, and in our current climate. So there's lots of challenges ahead, but I'm sure we're still enthusiastic, and looking forward to the next 10 years.
Excellent. Neil?
Well, I'm interested to see what's happening with, as Phil says, electric cars, hybrid cars, to see what happens on that side of things, I'm very keen to see what Hayden Paddington has with his car he's building, to see if there's a future there for electric rally cars or hybrid rally cars, because obviously it will have to follow manufacturers, whatever they produce, that's what we'll be rallying and racing. So I couldn't say whether I agree with it or disagree with it, really. I'm interested to see what's going to come. I actually drove an electric rally car, one of the first ones, I think. It was a good number of years ago for a local chap who was involved with Honda. I drove a Integra hybrid on the Jim Clark Rally as a bit of a one-off. It was a CVT gearbox, handled really well, but we were just running on the 1400cc petrol engine most of the time, to be honest with you, because of the nature of it. But obviously things are progressing at a massive rate now for electric cars and whatever. So in 10 years' time, who knows? I think whatever the manufacturers decide to do, that's the way we'll be going. So well, fingers crossed. We're still doing some form of motorsport, because you never know what could happen.
Angus?
Yeah, I've got to agree with Neil on that. I think I read. I've kind of haven't followed rallying that closely for the last 10 years, whilst I've been building my business and doing some other stuff. But I did hear that Opel, I think, are building an electric rally car. Has anyone else heard that? Could that be true?
Yeah, true. I think so. Yeah.
Opel's a manufacturer that's going to considerable amount of effort and time and resources going to go into that. So I guess that's the direction that we might be going in. Whether they'll have the same kind of drama as Escort WRC, with the pops and bangs that used to come out of the old Mount Tune ALS system. Do you remember that? Whether they're going to get the same kind of drama from them, but certainly, I suppose another aspect is if we're going to continue to use hydrocarbons and use fuel, is there's going to have to be some effort put into offsetting that. And I think that's another area where organisers and manufacturers and everyone involved in it should be starting to look at their carbon footprint, and they should start doing that now, right now, and find a way of convincing the public and the people who may have not such a positive view on what we're all doing as to how we're doing something to offset the carbon footprint of our sport.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're all aware of the Paris Agreement. 198 different nations signed up to keep global warming within certain parameters. As part of that automotive industry, by the end of this year, and certainly moving into next year, across the European fleet, in other words, all car manufacturers have to have an average of 95 grams of CO2 or under. That figure will drop even further to 75 grams by 2025. Now, clearly within the Volkswagen Group, for example, they've got different brands there. They've got Bugatti, they've got Bentley, and there are weighting systems against that, a bit like a coefficient that used to be in rallies. But either way, that's a big push. That's why you're seeing many hybrid car and electric cars coming on the market. And that clearly is going to have to be affected in how they go about marketing. Now, of course, the marketing has changed over the years. We remember at the height of our careers 15, 20 years ago. And a lot of influencers are being used instead of traditional advertising, TV, media. So, yeah, that certainly is a big consideration. You've got 9 manufacturers involved in Formula E. You've got the Extreme E version, the off-road side, which is a really interesting project from the same promoters as Formula E. We've got these buggies that are going to all electric, are going to visit 5 different regions, and part of an environmental project as well. So that's going to be really interesting to see what manufacturers will be interested in that type of thing going forward. Okay,
well, we're going to get
Andy.
Data. Sorry, Trev.
Go ahead.
Well, I said we're going to get some data at the end of this year, where we've gone through several months due to the worldwide lockdown and cars being sat on drives. So there's going to be a lot of data about you know, how, I mean, the planet looks visibly cleaner. I mean, we've all seen it. You've only got to look out of the window now, and I don't even live near a city, but the sky looks clearer to me. So the questions are going to be asked when we get back into our cars, and everyone, the whole, you know, lockdown is over, and hopefully this whole thing has passed us by. Is, well, do you really need to make that car journey through a forest? With thousands of people driving up into the forest as well to park in the spectator areas and watch you. So so something's in a maybe there are initiatives underway and I just haven't caught up with them. But something's going to have to be done very soon to say, well, we recognise that we're you know, burning fuel in the name of entertainment, and we need to look at a way of offsetting that.
Yeah, you're right, Angus. You know, we see this as organisers of Rally By. We come across protesters who you know, who don't share the same passion as we do, and it's something we're totally aware of going into planning an event, working with other partners from your recycling to you know, like you mentioned about carbon offsetting and you know, having to maybe plant 1,000 trees for every event that you put on. They're considerations we're making all the time now, and I hope other organisers are, and I'm sure they are. You know, so yeah, but it is a massive consideration going into the future.
Well, you're in a perfect position to lead that, because you can run your rally through a forest of trees that you've planted. That can't be too difficult to put that together.
Yeah, no, it's true.
You know, you can plant trees and then run a stage through those trees and say, well, these are the trees that got planted because we're running this stage through, and we'll come back next year and we'll run the stages again and we'll build more trees right here. We'll plant more trees. So there's an opportunity there, I think.
Definite. Yeah, definite.
Okay, Phil, I just want to go back and just share a little bit of what happened after Slipstream. So in 2001, you Simon Hughes. 2002, I think you moved and started co-drive Guy Wilkes at the time, which lasted, what, 9 years?
Yeah, I think I was...
Interesting that Guy and his dad came down to see us at Slipstream, I remember one time as well.
All right.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Yeah,
one of the ones that got away.
Yeah.
2002, I think we were in the Clio with Simon with Slipstream. So
yes, you were with Simon. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it was I think it was at the end of 2002, and Guy approached me and said they had this plan in place, and you know, would I step up to the JWRC with him then? And it was, you know, opportunity that I couldn't say no to. You know, I had to let Simon down, and I remember Ian Hughes, he wasn't too happy with me going, but there we go. We're good friends now, so that's all okay. But it was great to start the 2003 Junior World Championship with Guy in Monte Carlo, and it was pretty frightening, you know, because I'd only done GB beforehand and done the British Championship, so to step up to the World Championship was a big ask. And I remember we did the ceremonial start in Monte Carlo, and I think we did the long liaison section up to Gap and overnight. And I don't think I slept a wink that night. The adrenaline was pumping, and I kept thinking, you know, all the psychology we did with Slipstream, and just telling yourself, you know, be strong, you're good enough. That's why you're here. And it did pay off, because I remember the next day we were going flat out down some col, and the old head shrink we had with Slipstream, I was reading the notes, but my head was somewhere else, thinking this is what I wanted to do. So that analysis and all that time we spent with them people had certainly paid off. It was a fantastic feeling. Trev's gone, is he?
Excellent. The head shrink you talk about was a hypnotherapist.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, fascinating.
Self-hypnosis, that was unbelievable.
That's it. Yeah. You enjoyed that experience, and also we helped you with your dad as well, I think, don't we?
Oh, I was 13.5 stone, I think, when when I was there. When I was enjoying life, and I think I had a prolapse disc and everything. I couldn't run to start with. If you remember, you lot were jogging around the field, and I was walking because and transformation in 6 months was pretty good, I think. So I really enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah. I remember we got Simon going a bit faster in tarmac as well by using John Stevens that Neil and I were talking about in the podcast. Do you remember the effect of that? The front of mine is going to the Clark Rally in particular and setting a fastest time where you never really figured in tarmac prior to that.
No, definitely, and he got to grips with that Clio, and there was some established names against us, and I think the old Clio was pretty new then, and it was pretty fragile. I think we took some jumps on Jim Clark. There's a picture of us, I think, coming over Blackadder Bridge on its nose. And it wasn't long. The engine mountings had had enough, so it was fragile in some places. But then again, we went to the Isle of Man, and he was really competitive. And same on Ulster before we packed her in a bog. But he did show his speed, and his tarmac driving certainly came on. Yeah, definite.
Just talk us through the years with Guy then, because you had a lot of years, or 9 years with Guy, and a lot of the time with Suzuki.
Great. Yeah, fantastic. 2003 in the Puma. In the old Puma, it wasn't, you wouldn't say it was the best of the 1600s then, but I think we did more mileage than anybody in that year, and we learned so much. And when we got to Finland, I hadn't been told the plan, but the plan was that we were going to go absolutely flat out from the word go. And I hadn't even been told on recce or anything. And we turned up for shakedown, and the man to beat at the time in the Suzuki was Daniel Carlson. And I think we did the first run of shakedown. I thought, I'm spitting here, I got to get these notes out. And we finished the stage, and we were like 0.2 of a second behind Daniel Carlson. I thought, oh, Jesus, we're in the game here. So we had an eventful rally. It was fantastic. Lost the intercom and on Empoyer. I was screaming, pointing, everything. Put it in a ditch in Palestine Killer for 2-3 minutes. Set three or four fastest times, which was fantastic against all the works, Clios, Citroens, Peugeots then, and I think we finished third JWRC, which was fantastic. Basically, that then got in the drive with Suzuki, so it was worth going flat out, and it was well worth it. And we moved on to Suzuki 2004, and it was, I suppose, quite a difficult year because we had four of us as a team: ourselves, Mirko Baldacci, Kosti Karajamaki, and PG Anderson. And some big characters in that team, and sometimes it was quite difficult to get your view across, but Guy could get his view across. That was interesting. 2004, we missed out on the junior championship to our teammate PG. We slid off the road on the last morning on cold tyres in Catalonia. That was really hard pill to swallow because, we'd you see behind us, Greece, we won in Greece in 2004, and that was a real catalyst then and pushed us forward. So to lose that championship was difficult. 2005 then was a fantastic season. We'd been told in Finland in 2004 after we crashed, but it was a breakage on the car that cost us, that Guy had signed then for another 4 years with Suzuki. So it was a real confidence booster for a young driver, and he was going from strength to strength then, and we went on to the 2005 season, and we had 13 rounds of the World Championship. There were 6 of the JWRC, but the rest were like learning events for the future for the World Rally car that they were building. So as to map your future out, it was fantastic. Plus, at the time, he had big interest from Subaru as well, which was maybe a little bit of a distraction, but it was a nice distraction. Because I think they had Mikko Hirvonen in the team then, where Mikko really suffered, and to be told that you were wanted by another team. But I think the old men Japanese got together and they did a deal, and Guy stayed in Suzuki. So 2005 came, and I think we had some good events, but a few things let us down, I think. Remember rolling in Turkey after we'd had an argument coming out of a service, in dinner time service, where we'd been leading, and a guy decided he wanted to change the gearbox for some reason. There was a lot of work to do to the car, and the boys failed to do it, and we ended up having 30 seconds penalty, which put us on the back foot.
Wow.
Next stage, I don't think his head was quite in the right place, or both of us were in the quite right place, and we rolled. So that put an end to that. But we learned a lot, and 2006. And I can't remember where we were in the championship. 2005, maybe runner up again. I can't remember. We didn't quite. Oh, I remember now. We a certain Danny Sordo turned up it was in a Citroen, and I think again we went to the last round, Spain again, and I think we were beating Danny or very close to him, and then it was
in Spain.
In Spain, it's the famous crash where we came round the top of the hill on two wheels and went into a tree on our side, and that was the end of that. But we give it a good go. I remember management in Suzuki who were not happy at the end of that, but he kept his place for 2006. But things were changing then. There was a lot of things going on within the team, and it was quite difficult. We had a good championship again. I think we had a couple of funny failures on the car. We had an oil pipe go when we were leading by about 2 minutes in Sardinia, which was unheard of. And then we had a gearbox go on GB, and that put an end to that. And I think it was Patrick Sandal who won the championship then. PG took him close, but yeah, and that was the end then of the Suzuki years. It was a bit of a bitter end, and the contract that he sort of signed for 4 or 5 years had gone, which was a real shame. So he's left scrabbling really for 2007, and Mitsubishi UK came in, and we got into the back to the British Rally Championship, which was fantastic. Plus, he also then was part of the Ram Sport team with a young Andreas Mikkelsen.
Yeah,
who was only 17, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And it's again, it was quite difficult. I think we went to it was Rally Norway, not Sweden, Rally Norway, and I think we put it into a tree on the second day or something, which was head on, which was quite a big accident. We got that repaired, and we went to Portugal in the Focus. Then we had a great first stage, and then ending up putting it down a Portuguese mountainside, which was a horrible feeling. And then he went and tested the car after they fixed it and found that there was a problem with the front diff and it wasn't turning in anyway. So
okay.
I think we were passengers for them 2 accidents anyway. So we had a couple of good rallies then in the Focus. We went to Greece, and then we went to Finland, which was great. I think we set some top 4 times, which was fantastic. I remember Mika Hirvonen saying, that's because the car was 3-4 year old then, and he said that's really good times. And we ended up doing a massive jump in I can't remember the name of the stage, but was it Novikov who made that jump famous the other way after?
And Lutzu, was it?
It could have been, Moxie Lutzu, and
I think
we did it in the Focus like that, and I think Guy really pinched his back in that, and that was the end of that. And then I think we did Germany in the Focus, and that was quite difficult. I think we lost 10 minutes on the first stage or something. But meanwhile, back in Britain, in the Mitsubishi, that was going quite well, and we had a really good year. We had a really good scrap with Mark Higgins. That was a fantastic fight, and we had a good teammate in Gwyndaf, and we eventually won the championship on GB, which was a double header, and it was a fantastic feeling winning the championship in Wales, in Cardiff.
Home ground.
Yeah, it was the best feeling ever. Yeah, it was.
It was the big party.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
So
Interesting. I listened to Guy explain on Absolute Rally recently, just a couple of weeks ago, about the whole Subaru
Oh yeah.
interest, where he had a call initially from Paul Haft that said, would you be interested in doing something else, instead of asking the question, what exactly do you need? And he never did it. So it all sounded a little bit naive in Guy's point of view, but then he had an offer from Suzuki. And instead of going back to Subaru to find out what the deal was, he signed with Suzuki. Then Subaru said, well, we want you. And it was too late. He'd already signed for Suzuki. Is that your understanding of how it happened?
Yeah, it was along those lines. And there was lots of, I remember him sloping off in the middle of a service.
Yeah,
we were doing and he went to talk in the back of the Subaru service area. It was like,
he did
crazy, like.
Yeah, he tells a story. It's worth a listen in an Absolute Rally.
Yeah.
And over the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's a 2-parter actually. So
right.
Yeah, you can listen to his version of it. I'm sure it's absolutely accurate, but it just sounded as if it was just one of those opportunities that didn't go very well at all, you know. So anyway, just going on to Elvin then. So you did a little bit of gravel crew for Elvin. In 2012, you helped him win that academy, and that was great. That was a great boost for Elvin.
Yeah, it was fantastic, you know. And I you know, the 2011 with Guy, we'd finished with the Peugeot, and Guy had nothing. So basically, I spent 6 months not doing anything. It was great to be home with the kids, family time, and that. And Gwynder phoned me up saying he wanted me to go with Elvin, and it was really difficult because I knew Andrew well, who was in the car with Elvin, and it was really difficult. And I said, okay, I'll go and do the Pirelli Rally, and if I enjoy it, fair enough. But if I don't enjoy it or we don't get on, then you know I'll have to say no. And then we went to did Pirelli as a bit of a test, and it went well, and okay, everything was good. And we went on to do the rest of the junior championship, and it was a bit of a fairy tale really, because I did 4 events with him and 4 wins, and it was incredible. It was fantastic. Yeah, but it was all about preparation, you know. It was preparation was key, and Gwynder was fantastic with him. And the events we did, went to Finland to do a test and a small rally before the event because they didn't think they were fast enough a year before when he went. And that was such a good lesson to go there, learn how to drive the roads. And I remember doing the test, and Gwynder will tell you the story as well. We did the test, and after about half a day, I thought, it's going to get quicker in a minute because he's not quick enough at the moment. So Gwynder said, well, what do you think? I said, well, he's not going quick enough. Oh, shit. Right. Okay, we've got to get faster. But by the end of the test, he was going well, and I got Gwynder in the car, and I said, okay, he's going fast now, you have a look. And he got out the car and he was shaking.
Right, okay. Job done.
Job done. So we went and did this OK Auto Rally, and it was a couple of good local drivers. I think, is it Juha Korhonen, who's in the British Championship? He was, you know, he's a good benchmark. And we did the first stage, 16 kilometers in about 8 minutes. And it was fantastic, about 1 second behind Juha Korhonen. And next stage, he must have been on it because he was like a ball of scrap in the trees. Wow. And no, it was great. And we went on to Rally Finland a couple of weeks later and, you know, dominated it. So it was really good preparation. But the whole year was like that, preparation. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Any particular gems that people might find interesting? You talk about preparation. Anything that stands? You mentioned the rally that you did in Finland. That, you know, it's a bit similar actually. If you remember Simon Hughes, I co-drove Simon in 2001 in a rally in Estonia.
Yeah,
a really fast rally that his dad put together a deal, and we went. I don't think he could do it, so I sat in with him again. Yeah, and just the speed over there, it's great learning. Anything else in the preparation? She says all about preparation. What did Elvin do then that springs to mind?
Just everything, you know. He probably admit himself he wasn't very good physically before events, you know, and he wouldn't want to eat breakfast at all. Which, you know, on a World Championship rally now, if you don't have breakfast, then you've probably lost half your day. You're not back into a service area till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe. So little things, you know, that you had to get right to help the concentration, and it's paramount. And scheduling a day, you know, a time scale for him from the minute we left home in Wales here to the minute we got back is totally structuring his day. Yeah. So he knew exactly what he was, and time spent then obviously pace notes is all pace notes now, and checking the video after and double checking. So yeah, it's all about the structure and making use of the time, because time is precious with everything now, isn't it?
What do you think is the change this year for Elvin before all of this kicked off? He clearly, when he went to Monte Carlo in Sweden in particular, his performances in those rallies was just a league above. So what was different this year? You know him quite well.
Yeah, I think he's always shown over the last few years with Ford that he can put the stage times in now and again, but it wasn't consistent. So I suppose you've got to talk to him and understand what was going on in the Ford team. Obviously, when Ogier was there, it was another level maybe, and Elvin had to play second fiddle, and he played a fantastic second fiddle to him. So I don't think after maybe Ogier went, the level of intensity in the team dropped a bit. So I himself, he needed another challenge. He'd been in Ford, 4 or 5 years. So in life, you need to challenge yourself. So, and I think moving on to another team, he's just found another level, and it's working for him, definitely, isn't it?
Definitely is. Guys, any thoughts on Elvin any questions you want to ask Phil? Okay.
Sorry, Trev. Yeah. I hadn't realised, Phil, actually, that you'd sat with Elvin anyway. So you've enlightened me a bit there. But no, I'm the same as Trev. I've been absolutely outstanded by Elvin's performance for the first few rallies. It's just unbelievable. I think perhaps he's got some confidence changing teams. He's obviously he's sat in a team there that's well established. It's a quick car, and perhaps he just feels comfortable there. I don't know. Obviously, he felt comfortable at Ford, but
I think you can get too comfortable as well, can't you, Trev? Neil, you can get too comfortable in a team sometimes.
Yeah.
And like you say, you need to challenge yourself. So yeah, I think it's definitely worked for him. If you go back to Corsica last year when he was in the Ford, that last morning when he absolutely blitzed everybody, and then unfortunately, he had a puncture. So the speed is there, definitely. I remember from the first, I had never did a test with him before I went and did the Pirelli, and it was a night stage we did first, and 2 miles down the road, and I thought, Jesus Christ, this lad can drive, So I was convinced.
Yeah.
Angus, have you been watching the World Championship this year at all?
I've got to say, Trev, I'm really sorry to say I haven't really. I've seen a few bits here and there. I got a subscription to the WRC Live, and I watched a fair bit of that. And I've watched Elvin, and he's a very, very impressive young man. And hopefully, there's a British champion in the making there.
It's quite interesting how you got your subscription as well. If you want to just tell people how that
happened. After an absence of, I don't know, what was it, 5 years or 6 years since I've been anywhere near a rally, I met up with you in the service park, didn't I, before the shakedown, and we got in a car with Ryan Champion and drove up to the shakedown, and it was probably more than 5 years since I'd actually stood on the side of a stage. And I wasn't even sure exactly where, because we just popped out of the forest on the side of the stage. So I wasn't too familiar with what corner was ahead and what corner was before. And I heard the first cars coming, and we were standing near a square right, weren't we? And I was quite an open square right with a big ditch each side of it.
Just pull your microphone back a little bit, mate. You're
sorry.
That's okay.
Too close or
too that's
far?
fine. That's okay.
Yeah. And so, heard the first few cars coming, and I thought, maybe there's a loop around the stage where we're standing, because it sounds like it's going much too fast to brake for this corner. And first cars came through, first couple of cars, and it was there I realised that what massive uplift there'd been in the speed and the braking abilities of these new World Rally cars. So I thought, well, I'll film this. So I put my hand in my pocket, pulled out my mobile phone, and Ott Tannock came along. He was the next car to come along. He sounded like he was going even faster than any of the others as he was approaching up the hill. So I picked up the phone and I swept round and filmed him all the way around, and he went off. He went off straight into the ditch. And he was he world championship contender at that point, or leader? I mean, it was a key moment in his championship, wasn't it? It was the first time I turned up at a rally for years, and I managed to just film the story of the day. And I think I handed the phone to you. Always been much more of a technical wizard than I ever was. I said, "Hey, Trev, I just filmed that crash." I handed you the phone, and you sent it somehow straight back to WRC TV HQ.
Yeah.
And within minutes, Tommy Mackinnon was watching it on his monitor, and it became the news story of the day.
Yeah, and that's how you got your subscription, Omar, and the guys at WRC TV.
Yes, of course. Yeah, that was the question. So I had to give them the footage, and in return for that, they gave me a year's subscription to WRC Live.
Is that all?
He didn't negotiate well there, did he? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was all I needed, really. So I knew the next day somebody else would film something else, and I'd be yesterday's news. So I got what I could, whilst I could. And for everyone listening out there, WRC Live, I think it's very impressive and well worth signing up for. So that's advert.
Good advocate. All right. Just speaking of adverts, and if you want to tell us, I'm just conscious we're an hour and 3/4 into this, believe it or not. We don't want to go over 2 hours.
Is anyone still listening?
There's still a few, definitely. And of course, it will be uploaded onto both websites and be there for anybody to view at any time. So just tell everybody what you're up to now.
Well, I'm back in the garage. So I started my first job as an apprentice mechanic with the attached to the REME, as a civilian attached to the REME, and went off and did all sorts of things after that. Spent about 15 years working in motorsport. I pretty much left motorsport after Slipstream. I don't think I did an awful lot of work in motorsport after that, and I started a little business. I became a stay-at-home dad for a while. My wife still had her job. In fact, she was working for a PR company in London, where they did they worked for WRC, and they worked for quite a few other brands involved in sports. So she had a great job commuting to London, and so I stayed at home looked after the boy from between 9 and 3. I had some spare time whilst he was at nursery, so we started renting out air-cooled VW camper vans, and did that for several years. And then about 9 years ago, we started a air-cooled Porsche restoration business called Great Worth Classics. And then that's been going quite well. I still turn out on 2 or 3 historic rallies a year for a bit of fun, and it looks like from sort of last year into this year, I'm kind of getting back into the rallying by we're preparing a few cars for some of our customers who've decided to go rallying. Excellent. So we're gently getting back into it. And the latest thing on the rallying front is my middle son has just started driving. He's 15, and he's taking big interest in it. So the last thing that happened before lockdown is we went off to Norway with Peter Gwynn and did some ice driving on a frozen lake out there. And again, fantastic for car control. Anyone out there who's interested in getting into rallying, and they're maybe looking at getting their first car, joining their local club, starting their first few events. If you set aside a little bit of time to go and do that, Peter takes right-hand drive cars, takes 2 right-hand drive cars out there. Quite expensive, Norway, of course, but well worth the. It's probably the cost of doing an event, and fantastic experience for a youngster to get behind the wheel of a car on spiked tyres on ice. So I highly recommend that. And there's also a ski resort just around the corner, so you get a bit of skiing in as well.
Excellent. So how do people find you then on Tinternet?
All the W's, greatworthclassics.co.uk.
Excellent. Thanks, Gus. Phil, you haven't rallied in 7 years now, but clearly involved in the organisation of the Cardigan Bay Rally. What are you up to this weather?
So work's pretty busy. I haven't stopped in this lockdown. I'm self-employed contractor, electrical contractor. I had to furlough the boys, but they're mainly back now, so we're nearly back up to full steam. Builders are all back, so yeah, life's pretty busy again. It's been nice having some family time. It's great. We've got 4 teenagers in the house. One's driving, not passed his test yet. But luckily, maybe he's not that interested in motorsport. 2 of them have played hockey for Wales at an international standard. So
wow.
that's been a great passion, following them around Wales and UK and Europe last year. So that's been pretty good. So yeah, really proud of them. And Rally By. From the moment 2018, I think it was, we had a text message, or 4 or 5 of us had a text message, and from then I never knew a thing like that could take over your life. Unbelievable the time and effort everybody put into it last year, and it was a big kick, to having let it go this year. But like I said, we're already into 2021 planning, and that's going well already. So let's hope the world's in a better place by then, and we look forward to 2021 and in welcoming everybody to Aberystwyth for Rally By.
Excellent, Mr. Wearden. Then
he can come and do the rally.
Yeah, he's already signed up to it, hasn't he?
I shouldn't have said that on a public forum, should I? Really?
You're committed.
Yeah. I've just, for myself now, the garage has always been open through lockdown, and it is getting busier and busier now. I did a lot of work on the rally car actually during lockdown, because obviously the phone stopped ringing since the government put a 6-month extension onto MOT, so the phone sort of went very quiet for a while. So it gave me plenty of time to put some hours into the car, and it's making progress. And hopefully we'll see if I can get out towards the end of the year if there's any events running. But certainly next year I'll be out there somewhere making some noises, and hopefully some nice noises. But should be good. I'm just teaching, or my son's just turned 17, so I'm just helping him learn to drive, because obviously there's no tests at the moment. So unfortunately, maybe like you, Phil, he's got probably a long extended learning period, which is probably a bad thing, because I'm sure there's plenty of bad habits that I could teach him. But yeah, busy enough.
A hockey stick is definitely a lot cheaper than a rally car.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, a couple of memories I just want to share with you then.
Deutschland? Oh no, Finland. Yeah,
that's the jump me and Guy hit in the Focus, isn't it?
There you go. That's definitely Finland. Yeah. This one was in Cyprus. That's the first stage as well, I think, that we eventually got running on. New Zealand.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Could be Wales, that, to be fair, couldn't it?
My favourite ever overalls. They were amazing. I loved those. Grafoni organised those for us.
Quite retro, weren't they?
Yeah.
They're ahead of their time, they were. Well ahead of them. Have you still got them?
Somewhere. Great nephew will have them in time. They're clearly in the roof space somewhere. Corsica.
Yeah.
And again, the one that I've been using is this one. All right.
Was that Corsica as well? Yeah.
That's Corsica, yeah.
Look at that.
These young lads. Corsica. And then, of course, we changed to Subaru for Rally GB.
Yeah, nice looking car, that.
That was, a lot of people like that. That's the electric model that we've got, of course.
Yeah.
Good
nice
shot.
Photo.
That is a good shot.
All McLean photographs that I purchased the other day, so these are all good.
Wow.
Yeah.
I seem to remember that stage was very slippery. Oh, there you go.
Boy.
Look at that. We're on it there, aren't we? Look, heads down.
We're on it there. Exactly. Yeah. I wasn't waving at anybody there. I have a couple of photographs of me in the Civic where I was waving out the window, which I used to do quite regularly, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll not have that one. Guys, it's been absolutely wonderful. As I say, I want to try and keep it under 2 hours. Thanks very much for your time on a Sunday night, especially a beautiful Sunday night like this. For those of you that haven't listened to the podcast yet, where have you been? So stagebystage.com/blog is where you'll find it. If you want to send us an email or get in touch, that's the contact info there. And that's it. Any last words of wisdom that you want to share, guys, before we go?
Keep smiling.
Keep smiling.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Just make it look like if you're going rallying and you want people to follow you and get behind you, look like you're enjoying yourself.
Yeah. Stay positive.
Remember Petter Solberg, when he came onto the scene? Huge personality, loads of charisma, big grin on his face all the time. And, people really got behind him.
Yeah,
excellent.
Definitely.
It's a pet hate of yours, Neil, isn't it? We talked about in the podcast.
Miserable
drivers at the end of stages.
Yeah.
What's all that about? You're in a 700 grand rally car, getting paid to be there, and you're miserable as sin. Get over yourself.
Yeah. Great.
Only joking. Anybody who can handle one of those cars needs to be needed their own life. That's great. Guys, thanks very much. That's it for another week. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, enjoy yourselves, boys.
Cheers.